When you flip a house, it is a fantastic feeling. From getting the property under contract, looking for lenders, closing the property, rehabbing the property, and then selling the property and picking up the check. It's all an amazing process and something you can really learn a lot from. During this video, I will be telling you the top 3 problems that we typically run into when flipping a house. I'll also give you some tips on how to adapt and avoid the problem. Number 1, going over your rehab budget. All except one of our properties have gone over their rehab budget. And it's just something that always happens. The majority of investors who I speak with who flip houses, they always go over budget. That's just what happens. Things come up, whether it's rotten wood in the attic, in the walls, whether it's some foundational issues. You have to replace some of the cast iron piping. Stuff always happens. It is extremely frustrating, especially when you're in a hot market like this and profit margins are getting slimmer and slimmer. And you really have to be careful on which projects you do and how detailed your inspection is going to be so things don't pop up later. Here is how to avoid it. You need to add contingencies. This is a buffer space above your rehab budget. So for example, if you were going to put $100,000 into a rehab and that's your budget, you typically want to go over to, when you put in your numbers, you want to go over 10 to 15%. That's what we typically do. 10 to 15% over your rehab budget. That way you have a really good buffer space just in case something comes up. That way you have $10 to $15,000 just in case you have to rewire a house, some foundational issues, anything like that. You have to replace the pool filter. You really don't know until it happens, until it falls in your lap. So if you put that contingency, whether it's 10, 15, 20%, anything like that, into your numbers when calculating it for a flip, and you're still happy with the profits, then that's amazing. That's something that you should seriously consider closing on. Number 2 is permitting. This is more of a regional issue. So where we are right now, we do our flips in 3 main cities. So we have Cape Coral, Fort Myers, and Naples. This is all down in Southwest Florida. The permitting so they're all in different cities, so they all have different permitting departments. And when we apply for permits, typically Fort Myers and Naples take a lot longer than Cape Coral. Cape Coral is pretty quickly because there's a lot of projects going on. I don't know why necessarily. No one really knows why necessarily, unless you work for the permitting office, why it takes so long. For example, one of our properties in Fort Myers is right now taking 2.5 months for the permit to go through. And when you are paying $4,000, $5,000 a month in holding costs, that really adds up and it really takes away a huge chunk of your profits. And that's the same down in Naples. Actually, a couple days ago, our permit got approved, which is amazing. So we can start our rehab process now. So that's something that you need to stay really cognizant on, because that will delay your rehab project big time and chew down your profits. How you can avoid this is by putting those numbers into your analysis when analyzing this flip, just like the rehab budget. So typically we add 2 months on top of where we think and how long we think the project will take. So if we think it'll take 2 months, we say 6 months. If we take 3 months, it'll be 5 months. So having that buffer space, if it only takes 2-3 weeks like it should, then that's amazing. But if it takes 2 months, then you're already covered. That goes in a market like this where profits can be and are starting to be incredibly slim. You want to make sure that you have very conservative numbers in your permitting. Number 3 is appraisals. So this is something that is very frustrating because it's typically out of your hands. So when you purchase a house and when you sell a house through a bank, you are always going to have an appraisal done on the property. And what the appraisal is going to be the assessed value that the bank views your property at. That way they can see how much money they're going to be lending you. That goes for when you're selling the property. And that goes the same for the buyer. So if the buyer is going through a bank, then the bank will do an appraisal on the property. So if he has it on a contract for $300,000, and he's putting 20% down and the appraisal comes back at 285, then the bank is only going to be lending at the 285, and then he has to come up on closing day with the $15,000 in between what he's buying it for and what the bank has appraised it for. This has become an issue with some of our lower priced properties in this market because as the prices increase, I think it was the past 12 months, the properties increased by, I think 20%, something ridiculous. And what's happened is that when they do the appraisals, it typically takes 30 to 60 days for the appraisal to go into the system for it to be public information. So when you have these crazy increases, you know, our property could be fairly priced in the market, but it's still 5% over the average because that appraisal hasn't caught up in the past 2 months. So our lower price properties where you're doing the VA loans, the FHA loans, typically low percentage down, a lot more regulation, a lot more red tape from the banks, that can really be an issue when you're selling a high-end property with a lot of updates. It's going to be top price in your area. That's when you may run into, that's when we've run into a lot of issues with appraisals. So typically this is out of your hands, but how we have avoided that is by buying and rehabbing higher priced properties. Because when you rehab high priced properties, typically the buyer is a cash buyer. And when you're a cash buyer and you're not going through a loan, you don't need to do an appraisal. So with all of our high-end properties that we've sold, we haven't had any issues with appraisals because they've all been cash buyers, which is amazing for us and amazing for them. So unfortunately, the appraisals are a necessary evil when you're buying and selling a property, but there are ways that you can go around it, such as what we are starting to do, which is doing the high-priced properties, selling to wealthier cash buyers instead of the working family who are doing a low 3.5% down loan. So the three things I was just telling you, the rehab budget, the permitting, and the appraisals, are the three biggest things that we have found, but that's something that we have adapted around the last few months. And we've started to be proactive in these issues instead of reactive when they come up. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I really appreciate it. I hope you got something out of that. Again, they are the three biggest problems that come up typically when you're flipping properties, and they will come up with yours eventually, sooner or later. So it's just how you deal with them, how you can adapt around the situation and go forward and start making some more money. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.